Imagine putting your hand directly into a roaring fire.
Oh, man.
Right. Your skin blisters. The pain is just agonizing.
Hmm.
And standing right next to you is the person who loves you most in the entire world.
Yeah, like your mother, your partner, your child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were completely beside themselves with grief. I mean, they would do absolutely anything to take your place. They would gladly absorb that pain to save you. But here is the brutal, unbreakable reality. They
Mm.
can't.
No, they really can't.
They can hug you, they can cry, they can, pay the medical bills later, but they cannot feel your physical pain.
Because your nervous system completely isolates you.
Exactly.
I mean, the burn is on your flesh. The pain signals are traveling up your spinal cord. It is an entirely closed, localized loop. Biology simply does not allow for intercession. Love cannot hack the nervous system.
It really can't. And that visceral, kind of harsh reality is the perfect entry point for what we are tackling today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're getting into an incredibly famous 7th century foundational text today, Surah Luqman, specifically verses 33 and 34.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And the reason we are starting with that image of the fire is because the traditional mainstream interpretation of these verses has historically been used to generate pure apocalyptic terror.
Yeah, it really has.
It's usually framed as this theological horror story about the end of the world. But today we are doing something different. We're using the analytical framework of a scholar named Ghulam Ahmed Parwez. And when you look at his work from November 1979, the spooky, superstitious fog just completely lifts.
Completely.
We aren't looking at a mystical spell book here. We are looking at a masterclass in civilizational design and systems engineering.
It really is a massive paradigm shift. I mean, Parwas strips away centuries of inherited anxiety-inducing dogma. He forces us to look at this text not as a threat from an angry deity, but as a sober socioeconomic blueprint.
Right.
It's about the inescapable architecture of cause and effect.
Okay, well, let's jump right into the deep end here because I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Verse 33 contains a line that, on its face, sounds terrifying. It translates roughly to, "O people, be conscious of your Lord and fear a day when no parent will avail their child, nor will a child avail their parent at all."
Yeah, that's the standard translation.
Now, if I read that, and honestly, if 99% of people reading that see it, we immediately picture Judgment Day. We picture the sky falling, fire and brimstone,
Yeah.
a singular catastrophic event. So how do we linguistically or logically justify ignoring that traditional reading?
Well, the key is that we aren't ignoring it. We are actually reading the precise Arabic rather than all the cultural baggage attached to it over the centuries.
Okay, unpack that.
So the word used there is yom, which gets translated simply as day. The traditionalist reads day and thinks of a 24-hour period, a specific Tuesday in the future when the universe magically collapses.
Right, a literal day.
Exactly. But in classical Arabic, yom is far more dynamic than that. It isn't tied to the rotation of the earth. It could be an epoch lasting 50,000 years.
Wait, really? So a day could be a millennia?
Easily. And that completely changes the meaning of the verse. It changes from a calendar date to a manifestation point.
A manifestation point.
Yeah. Parwez explains that the day being described is not a single terrifying future cataclysm. It is the precise moment when the hidden cumulative consequences of an action finally emerge into a visible, unavoidable reality. It is the constant, unbreakable structure of consequence.
Let me see if I'm tracking this. Are we talking about something like a medical diagnosis?
How do you mean?
Like if I spend 30 years smoking cigarettes,
August.
right? Every single cigarette is a microscopic action. It's causing damage, but I can't see it. I feel fine.
You're just living your life.
Exactly. I go to work, I live my life. But then, 30 years later, I get a chest scan and there's a tumor. Is a yom the day of the scan?
That is a perfect analogy. Yes. The disease was gestating silently. The cause and effect ledger was updating with every single cigarette, but it was invisible to you. You were in the latent phase.
Wow.
The yom is the manifestation point. It's the day the hidden process spikes into a physical, undeniable reality. So when the text says to fear a day, it's not saying cower in terror because the world is ending.
Right.
It's saying be intensely aware that your actions are building toward a manifestation point.
Man, that completely flips the script.
It really does.
The message isn't about some external apocalypse. It's an intensely practical warning about present-day actions. It's basically saying, stop assuming you can dodge the math, which actually brings us back to that visceral opening hook. the parent not being able to avail the child.
Right, the illusion of the intercessor.
Yeah.
In our modern society, and frankly throughout all of human history, we are totally obsessed with bailouts. We rely on our social networks to absorb the consequences of our bad actions.
We really do. If a massive corporation makes terrible, toxic financial bets and goes bankrupt, they just lobby the government to bail them out using taxpayer money.
Exactly. Or on a smaller scale, think about nepotism. A kid gets into serious legal trouble, and their wealthy parents hire a team of lawyers to just bury the problem. We use status, wealth, and tribal connections as currency to pay off our systemic debts.
But the architecture of this universal system, the system described in Surah Luqman, it does not recognize collective bailouts.
Not at all. It operates on absolute individuation. That is what verse 7.3 is establishing right out of the gate.
Absolute individuation.
Yes. When the yom hits, when the consequence finally manifests, you cannot pass the buck. You are the ultimate irreducible unit of accountability. Family, tribe, your social network, none of these are valid currencies.
You know, it's taken modern psychology thousands of years to catch up to this concept.
Oh, absolutely.
We have endless literature today about personal boundaries, about carrying your own trauma, about taking radical ownership of your agency. And here's a text from the 7th century stating unequivocally that your agency and your consequences are entirely your own. The system forces you to be an individual.
It forces accountability, yes. Because if you fundamentally understand that no one can intercept the consequences of your actions, not even the people who love you most, it completely alters your decision-making matrix. You realize you cannot outsource your risk management.
Okay, I want to pause on that phrase you just used, fundamentally understand, because usually in a religious or textual context, we don't say understand, we say believe.
We do.
And the sources point out that we really need to redefine what belief actually means in this framework, stripping away all the sentimentality.
We have to, because the word belief has been severely diluted over the years. Today, belief is often just treated as lip service. It's a box you check on a census form.
Right.
Or it's something you only invoke when you're in a crisis, like praying when your airplane hits severe turbulence.
Yeah, we treat belief like poetry. It's an aesthetic choice, not a physical law.
Exactly. But Parwez provides this incredibly sharp analogy to redefine belief as an operational reality. He says, think about the natural law that dictates arsenic is a deadly poison. What does it actually mean to believe in that law?
Well, it definitely doesn't mean I join a club that sings songs about how dangerous arsenic is and then go home and sprinkle it on my cereal.
Precisely. Believing that arsenic is lethal means your behavior strictly aligns with avoiding it. A rational agent doesn't worship the rule against eating arsenic. They don't build a shrine to the concept of poison.
They just don't eat it.
Right. They simply adhere to the physical reality because the consequence of defying it is self-destruction. In this text, belief in the divine laws or the laws of consequence is exactly the same. It is an absolute conviction that human actions produce inevitable results just as surely as physical actions do.
So if I claim I believe in this system of consequence, but my daily actions are exploitative, like if I'm cheating my employees or lying to my community or destroying my own health, my claim of belief is completely void.
Completely void.
Because my operational reality shows I actually think I can eat the arsenic and get away with it.
Yeah. You're hoping for a magical intervention to change the chemistry of the poison after you swallow it. And the text is saying there is no magic. The chemistry is fixed.
This brings up a really interesting linguistic challenge. Because if belief is this hyper-rational operational adherence to rules, why do the traditional translations of these texts use words that sound so passive and mystical?
Give me an example.
Well, like the word mutaki. In almost every translation I've seen, it's rendered as pious or righteous.
Yes.
To me, a pious person is someone who just sits quietly in a corner, reads a book, and tries not to bother anyone. It doesn't sound like a systems engineer.
You've hit on a major linguistic roadblock. Over centuries, the original highly active meanings of these Arabic roots have been softened by cultural and religious baggage. Let's perform a bit of excavation on that word, mutaki.
Dig in. I really want to know what it actually meant to a 7th century Arab listener.
The root of mutaki paints a vivid, highly active picture of risk management. It describes a traveler. But this isn't someone strolling through a manicured city park. This is a traveler navigating a highly dangerous, rocky, treacherous mountain ravine.
Oh, wow. So they are in a high-stakes environment.
Extremely high stakes. One slip and they break an ankle, or worse, they fall into the abyss.
Right.
So how does this traveler move? They move with extreme calculated caution. They are gathering their loose clothing tightly around them so it doesn't snag on a thorn bush or trip them up near a precipice. They are scanning the path ahead, anticipating loose rocks, analyzing the terrain.
They are hyper-aware.
Exactly. That hyper-awareness, that physical and mental vigilance to avoid a destructive fall, that is what it means to be a mutaki.
That is mind-blowing.
That changes it entirely, right?
Yeah. So what tradition calls piety, which feels like a moral judgment from on high, is actually advanced systemic risk management. It's not about being holier than thou. It's just about not wanting to fall off a cliff.
It is entirely pragmatic. The mutaki wants to survive the journey. They aren't paralyzed by a superstitious fear of the mountain. They are highly motivated by caution. They respect the gravity of the ravine.
And there's another word right next to this concept that gets similarly distorted, khashiyat. The verse tells people to approach the day with khashiyat, which is lazily translated just as fear.
Yes, the classic translation.
Again, if I hear fear God or fear the day, I think of cowering in front of a tyrant who might arbitrarily strike me with lightning if I, wear the wrong hat.
Right, the fear of an unpredictable dictator. But that's not khashiyat at all. Arabic has many words for fear, each with distinct psychological nuances. Khashiyat is incredibly specific.
Okay, what is it?
To understand it, we have to look at the socioeconomic reality of the people who first heard this text. We are talking about 7th century Arabia. Water is devastatingly scarce. Agriculture is an immense, back-breaking struggle against a very hostile environment.
So farming isn't a hobby. It's a desperate fight for survival.
Exactly. Now imagine a farmer in that environment. They have invested immense physical labor to clear a patch of land. They have used incredibly expensive, hard-to-find seeds. They've spent months carefully managing a tiny trickle of water.
Just grinding it out.
Yeah, and finally, they have a green, thriving field. It represents their entire livelihood. It is their future.
I can imagine the stress.
The psychological state of that farmer as they look at their field, that is khashiyat. It is a hyper-vigilant anxiety born out of deep investment.
Oh, I see.
It's the terrifying awareness that a single operational misstep, like falling asleep and forgetting to open the irrigation channel or ignoring a pest infestation, will cause that incredibly valuable crop to dry up and die permanently.
Okay, I really need to sit with that. That fundamentally changes everything.
It grounds the concept in reality.
It really does. So when the text says, approach the system of consequence with khashiyat, it's not saying cower before a monster. It's saying treat your life, your community, your civilizational structure with the same hyper-vigilant care that a desert farmer treats a fragile crop.
Because the stakes are just as high. If you are careless, if you are negligent, the system will not hesitate to dry up your harvest. The universe doesn't hate the farmer when the crops die.
Right. Gravity and evaporation don't have a personal vendetta against you.
The universe is just enforcing its laws.
Hearing it framed like this, it makes me wonder, how on earth do we survive this?
What do you mean?
Well, if I am this isolated unit of accountability, and I have to walk this tightrope in a ravine and guard my crops with this intense anxiety, it just sounds exhausting. Human beings are fallible. We make bad choices. We get tired. How do you thrive in an environment with such strict, unbreakable consequences?
By adopting the correct ideological operating system.
Okay, an operating system.
Yeah. If you are going to navigate highly complex, unforgiving external hardware, meaning the universe, your internal software needs to be perfectly calibrated to match it. In this textual framework, that correct operating system is called the kalima tayyiba.
Kalima tayyiba,
Sure.
which usually gets translated as the good word, like a pleasant greeting or a nice proverb.
That's the colloquial translation, yes.
But I'm guessing, based on our track record here today, it means something much more robust.
Far more robust. Kalima in this context implies an overarching ideology, a complete paradigm of life. And tayyiba means something that produces healthy, life-giving, constructive results.
So a constructive ideology.
Exactly. And the text itself uses a brilliant engineering metaphor to explain what this ideology actually looks like. It compares the kalima tayyiba to a specific kind of tree.
A tree with its roots driven deep into the earth and its branches reaching high into the sky.
Yes. Let's analyze the physics of that metaphor. The roots are driven deep into the earth. What does that tell us about this ideology?
I mean, it's grounded.
Right. It means it is firmly, unshakably grounded in material reality. It is not an escapist, floaty, mystical philosophy that tells you to ignore the physical world and just go meditate on a mountain.
It has to understand the dirt.
Exactly. It understands economics. It understands biology, sociology, power dynamics, supply chains. It is anchored in the grit of how the world actually functions. No political storm or economic crisis can uproot it because it doesn't deny reality.
But it's not just stuck in the mud. Right. Because the second half of the metaphor is that the branches reach high into the sky.
Right. So while it is grounded in stark realism, it simultaneously aims at the highest human potential. It has an overarching, transcendent vision that pulls humanity upward toward justice, equity, and discovery. It is the perfect synthesis of pragmatism and ultimate idealism.
And the sources emphasize another critical feature of this tree, that's yield. It says it bears fruit in all seasons.
This is where we see the test of a true civilization. A valid ideology is a perpetually productive socioeconomic engine. It isn't a spent cartridge.
It doesn't expire.
Right. It isn't a set of rules that worked great in the 7th century, but became totally obsolete during the Industrial Revolution. If an ideology is truly aligned with the universal laws of consequence, it will produce solutions, prosperity, and stability in any era. It adapts to the technological climate, but it keeps producing the same nourishing fruit.
Okay, so if this Kalima Tayyiba is the ultimate, perfect software for human flourishing, why isn't everyone running it? Why is human history just an endless parade of failed states, wars, and exploitation? What threatens this tree?
Systemic deception. In the text, this force of deception is symbolized by the concept of Satan or Shaitan. But again, we have to strip away the medieval mythology here. Parwaz warns us not to picture a red creature with horns and a pitchfork hiding under your bed.
Right, because if evil looked like a literal monster, it would be easy to avoid. You just run away.
Exactly. Deception only works if it is attractive. The text explains that this deceptive force operates as an optical illusion. It takes destructive short-term actions and makes them look incredibly shiny, profitable, and logical. It creates a beautiful, gleaming facade over a rotten, structurally unsound foundation.
Oh man, I instantly think of the 2008 financial crash.
Oh, that's a great example.
The entire subprime mortgage industry was this massive optical illusion. It looked like a brilliant, risk-free way to make billions of dollars. The facade was spectacular. Everyone was getting rich on paper. But the underlying math, the actual roots in the dirt, were completely toxic.
That is a phenomenal modern parallel. The systemic deception convinced millions of highly educated people that short-term profit negated the long-term systemic cost. It made the poison look like food.
And so the rational agent, the Mutaki, navigating the ravine, their main job is to look past that optical illusion.
Yes. They have to run the math all the way to the end. They have to anticipate the the manifestation point, and see that those toxic assets will eventually crash the whole economy. Deception relies heavily on making you short-sighted.
It hides the horizon.
Right. The Kalima Tayyiba demands that you calculate the true, long-term systemic cost of every action.
But hold on. Calculating that long-term cost requires dealing with the hardest, most frustrating variable in any equation: time.
Always.
We know a consequence is coming, but when exactly will it manifest? I mean, I can know smoking causes cancer, but if I don't know which year I'll get it, I might risk it for a decade.
Human nature.
Right. And this brings us to the absolute core of this discussion, what the sources call the 5 unknowns in verse 34. And I want to spend a lot of time here because this is where the traditional interpretation really clashes with the modern scientific world.
It does. Verse 34 is perhaps one of the most chronically misunderstood passages in this entire textual tradition, and the misunderstanding has caused immense intellectual damage over the centuries.
Let's lay out what the verse actually covers. Traditionally, this verse is presented as a definitive list of 5 ultimate secrets. 5 pieces of data that are exclusively locked away in God's vault, and human beings are forbidden or simply incapable of ever knowing them.
The forbidden knowledge.
Yeah. The list is 1, the exact time of the hour, or the manifestation point. 2, when the rain will fall. 3, what is forming in the womb. 4, what a soul will earn tomorrow. And 5, in which land a person will die.
And for over 1,000 years, dogmatists have wielded this list as a weapon to enforce intellectual submission.
How so?
They point to it and say, look at how helpless you are. You mere mortals can't even figure out when water is going to fall from the sky, so stop asking complicated questions about the universe. Just bow your heads, accept your ignorance, and obey the clerics.
It's the ultimate conversation ender. God knows, you don't. shut up.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
the Parwez framework completely blows this out of the water. And it doesn't blow it up by rejecting the text. It blows it up by performing grammatical surgery on the actual Arabic.
Walk me through this, because this is fascinating. How did the reading get so skewed in the first place?
It's a classic case of retroactive projection. To understand the mistranslation, you have to look at the historical context. A lot of the rigid, traditional interpretations we have today were heavily influenced by external traditions and hadith compilations like Bukhari, which were codified centuries after the original text around the 9th century.
So we're talking about a totally different cultural climate.
Completely different. The 9th century was a time of political consolidation, empire building, and the cementing of clerical authority. There was a strong cultural drive to emphasize the absolute, untouchable mystery of the divine to maintain order and awe.
Make the people feel small so they behave.
Right. So when scholars from that era looked at verse 34, they read it through a lens that wanted to maximize human helplessness.
But what does the actual grammar of the 7th century text say? Because you said Parwez points out a glaring omission in how it's translated.
He points out that if you look at the raw Arabic structure regarding the first three items, the hour, the rain, and the room, the text does not use restrictive particles.
Wait, ELI5 that for me. What is a restrictive particle?
Okay, so in Arabic, if you want to say, only God knows and absolutely no one else can ever know, you use specific grammatical tools. You use words like inama or fakat, or you structure the sentence with a negative followed by an exception, like none knows except God.
Okay, that makes sense. It locks the door.
Exactly. It makes the knowledge exclusive. But Parwez shows that in verse 34, those grammatical locks are entirely missing when it comes to the rain in the womb. The text simply states a positive fact. The system, the divine law, has this data. It says, with him is knowledge of the hour, and he sends down the rain, and he knows what is in the wombs.
Wait, really? So it doesn't say only God knows?
No.
Oh, wow. So it's just a statement of systemic completeness. It's saying the system runs these processes. It literally does not say, and therefore you humans are too stupid to ever figure it out.
Precisely. It is establishing that the universe is governed by laws that have complete data on physical processes. But because they are physical deterministic processes, there is no prohibition against humans studying them.
This grammatical distinction is massive because it totally diffuses the panic that traditionalists feel today when confronted with modern science.
It resolves the whole conflict.
Think about it. A person is raised being told, my holy book definitively says no human can ever know when it will rain. Then they turn on the evening news, and the local meteorologist brings up a supercomputer Doppler radar model and says it will start raining in your neighborhood at exactly 4:15 p.m.
And the meteorologist is right.
They're exactly right. And not just predicting it, but actively manipulating it. The sources mention cloud seeding. We live in a world right now where countries are threatening geopolitical conflict over stolen rain.
Stolen rain, yeah.
One nation shoots silver iodide into the clouds, the wind blows, and the rain falls on their side of the border instead of the neighbors. We are literally programming the sky.
And what happens to the traditionalist when they see that? They experience severe cognitive dissonance. If your entire faith is propped up on the idea that rain is a magical secret, then a meteorologist isn't just a scientist. They are a threat to your theology. Science becomes the enemy of belief.
The exact same goes for the womb. If the dogma says no one can know what's in the womb, and then you walk into a clinic, get an ultrasound, and the technician says, it's a boy, he weighs this much, and his heart rate is 140 BPM, your dogma shatters.
But Parwez's linguistic accuracy saves the text from obsolescence because the text never made that anti-scientific claim in the first place. The text accommodates scientific progress perfectly.
Right, because rain is just a thermodynamic physical process. Embryology is a biological process.
The divine system dictates the laws of how they work. But because they operate on fixed laws, human beings who are given intellect can observe those laws, model them, and predict them. They are data points in a rational universe, not magic tricks.
Okay, this is a huge relief. The text isn't anti-science, but it does leave us with a massive question.
Which is,
if we can use supercomputers to figure out the weather, and we can use ultrasound to see inside the womb what are the true unknowns? Because the verse doesn't stop there. It lists two more things, and I notice the language shifts.
the text makes a very sharp, deliberate pivot here. While it just stated positively that the system manages rain in wombs, it uses completely different, definitively restrictive phrasing for the final two items.
It does.
Yes. It says, And no soul perceives what it will earn tomorrow, and no soul perceives in what land it will die.
No soul perceives. That is a hard boundary.
That is the line in the sand. These two things, what you will do tomorrow and the context of your death, are the categories of irreducible uncertainty.
Right.
They are fundamentally different from weather and biology.
You know, I'm struggling a bit here to bridge the gap. If the universe is this massive, perfectly integrated system of cause and effect, why is human behavior tomorrow totally off limits to prediction? If we had a big enough computer, couldn't we predict what a human will do?
No, and the reason why is the physics of free will.
The physics of free will.
To explain this, the sources provide an absolutely brilliant analogy that contrasts deterministic physics with conscious agency. I want you to imagine a room full of the 10 smartest astrophysicists on the planet. They have the most advanced quantum computers, decades of data, and flawless math.
Okay, I'm picturing them.
If you ask those 10 scientists to predict a solar eclipse that will happen exactly 1,000 years from today, they can do it. They can tell you exactly what second the sky will go dark and exactly which city on Earth will see the totality of the shadow.
And they'll be right.
They will be 100% right. Why? Because planets, moons, and stars are dead matter. They are locked into fixed, deterministic orbital paths dictated by gravity. The moon does not wake up one morning and decide it wants to orbit Mars instead. It has no choice.
It's a closed system.
Exactly. But now, take those same 10 brilliant scientists with those same supercomputers and point to a common housefly buzzing around their desk. Ask them to predict exactly which square inch of the desk that fly will land on in the next 10 seconds.
They can't do it.
They are completely powerless to predict it. Why? Because the housefly, however rudimentary its brain may be, possesses a localized form of agency. It is a living entity making choices based on sensory input. It can dart left, it can dart right. The introduction of choice instantly shatters predictability.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. And if a fly shatters predictability, what happens when you scale that up to a human being?
You get complete irreducible uncertainty. A human being has highly complex, conscious free will. We can override our instincts, we can change our minds, we can be influenced by an idea we read in a book 5 minutes ago. If you grant an entity the power of true choice, their future cannot be calculated.
So if my future could be calculated like a solar eclipse, it would mean I'm on a fixed track. It would mean my choices are an illusion, and I'm essentially just a biological robot following a script.
Exactly. This completely reframes the concept of uncertainty. We usually hate not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. We view our inability to predict the future as a weakness or a failure of our technology.
Sure.
But this framework says the opposite. The fact that no algorithm, no prophet, and no supercomputer can predict what you will do tomorrow is the very proof that you are free. Irreducible uncertainty is the engine of free will.
Unpredictability is the oxygen of agency. Without it, moral weight doesn't even exist. I mean, if I am programmed to steal, I can't be held accountable. If my future is open, my choice not to steal actually matters.
And if we dig deeper into the psychology of this, we realize that knowing the future wouldn't just strip us of our free will, it would actually be a psychological curse. It would induce complete paralysis. The sources provide 2 more analogies here to prove that our ignorance of tomorrow is actually a deeply merciful design feature.
Let's start with the lighter one, the sports analogy.
Right. Think about watching a live, high-stakes cricket match or a hockey game or the Super Bowl. Your favorite team is playing. It's tied. There are 2 minutes left on the clock. You are on the edge of your seat. Your heart rate is up. You are shouting at the screen. You are fully immersed in the joyous stream of life, experiencing hope, fear, and exhilaration.
Because the outcome is unknown. Both winning and losing are actively possible in that moment.
Now, imagine a different scenario. You missed the game, your friend records it, but before they hit play, they tell you, hey, your team wins by 1 point, and the winning play happens with exactly 14 seconds left. Then you sit down to watch the recording. How do you feel?
I'm incredibly bored. I might watch the highlights, but I'm definitely scrolling on my phone during the rest of the game. The tension is entirely gone.
Because the uncertainty has been removed, and with the uncertainty gone, the vitality of the struggle evaporates. If you knew every success, every failure, every heartbreak, and every victory you're going to experience in your life before it happened, life would become a tedious, unbearable script you were just forced to act out.
You'd just be waiting for the clock to run out. That makes a lot of sense. But there's a darker side to this paralysis of knowing, which connects to the final unknown in verse 34. No soul perceives in what land it will die. The condemned prisoner analogy.
This one is chilling, But it highlights the mercy of the system's design. We do not know our expiration date. We don't know the context of our exit. Now imagine if we did. Imagine a prisoner on death row. All their legal appeals are gone. The warden walks in and says, "Your execution is scheduled for exactly 6:00 a.m. next Tuesday."
The psychological torture of those intervening days.
It is a living hell. The prisoner dies 1,000 times before Tuesday even arrives. Every single tick of the clock is a loud countdown to the abyss. They can't enjoy a final meal. They can't have a normal conversation with their family. The absolute certainty of their impending death paralyzes their ability to exist in the present moment.
So our ignorance of the exact time and place of our death is what allows human civilization to function at all. It's what allows us to plant orchards we might never see bear fruit. It allows us to build houses, to fall in love, to start businesses. We operate as if we have an infinite horizon, precisely because the actual horizon is hidden behind a wall of irreducible uncertainty.
If everyone knew their exact date of death, society would instantly collapse. If you knew definitively that you were going to die in a car crash next Wednesday, why would you go to work on Monday? Why would you invest in your child's college fund? The uncertainty is the glue that keeps civilizational progress moving forward.
This is such a profound way to look at it. But it also perfectly explains why human history is littered with industries desperately trying to hack this uncertainty. I'm talking about the fortune tellers, the astrologers, the psychics. We are so uncomfortable with not knowing that we seek out charlatans who claim they can bypass the system.
The tyranny of the fortune tellers. Yes, human beings crave the comfort of a guaranteed outcome. But the sources point out that this isn't just harmless entertainment at a carnival. Believing in fortune tellers actively hijacks your human agency.
How so?
Because it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that overrides your free will. If a soothsayer convinces you that you are astronomically destined to fail at a business venture, you will likely stop trying. You withdraw your effort, you surrender your autonomy to a fabricated prediction, and in doing so, you guarantee the failure.
You hand the steering wheel over to a ghost. The sources also mention specific religious movements like the Qadiani prophecies cited in the lecture, where leaders claim to predict future events, or even predict the exact dates when their theological rivals would die. Now, to be clear, we aren't here to take a theological side or debate the merits of any specific sect, but from a purely sociological perspective, why do leaders do this?
From a sociological standpoint, claiming to know the future is the ultimate power trip. It is an attempt to usurp the position of the divine system itself. If a leader can convince a population that they hold the blueprint of tomorrow, they wield absolute control over those people today. They monetize the anxiety of the masses.
It's a mechanism of control. And what the Quranic text does, through Parwez's framework, is completely strip that power away from everyone. It democratizes the future by making it equally opaque to the king, the cleric, and the peasant. No prophet, no saint, no politician, and no AI algorithm can tell you what a free human will choose tomorrow. The system defends your autonomy by keeping your future encrypted.
Exactly. No one has VIP access to the vault of tomorrow.
Okay, so if the future is definitively mathematically unknowable and we can't hack the system to find out the final score, how does a rational agent act today? If I am a mutaki navigating the ravine, what is my actual operational strategy if I don't know when the rock slide is coming?
The strategy is encapsulated in the concept of mukafa-amal, the law of requital. Because the productive response to irreducible uncertainty is not paralysis, and it is not nihilism. The response is correct alignment right now.
Let's go back to our anxious farmer from earlier, the one experiencing Kashiyat.
Right. The farmer does not know exactly what day the harvest will be ready. He does not know if there will be a sudden, unexpected frost in 3 months that could wipe out the crop. The future of his field is technically uncertain.
But does that uncertainty stop him from planting the seed today?
No. If he waits for absolute 100% certainty, he will starve to death. He plants the seed today because he understands the underlying law of requital. He knows that seeds placed in good soil, given water and sunlight, tend to grow. He aligns his physical actions with the system of consequence today, and he lets the timeline take care of itself.
Acting under conditions of irreducible uncertainty is basically the definition of courage.
It is the foundation of any functional socioeconomic system. You act correctly now because the consequence cycle is running in the background whether you acknowledge it or not. The only variable you actually control is whether your inputs are aligned with that cycle.
And this brings us beautifully to the very end of Surah Luqman, the closing phrase of the entire chapter. Indeed, God is knowing, aware, or in the Arabic, kabir. Now, I know how this is usually interpreted. It's the panopticon. It's the surveillance state. God is watching you, so don't steal that cookie or you'll be punished. It gets reduced to a behavioral threat to keep children in line.
It does. But in the systems engineering framework we've been building, Kabir means something much more profound and structural. It translates to being fully informed, deeply aware of the intrinsic reality of things. It means the system's ledger is completely balanced.
So that's an accounting term almost.
Exactly. It means every single input, every tiny action, every hidden exploitation, every quiet act of justice is registered by the system. Nothing is lost in the margins. Nothing falls through the cracks of the universe.
Which means you don't need to know the timeline of the consequence. You just need to know the system is complete.
That is the ultimate relief for the rational agent. You don't need to obsess over when the consequence will arrive because you trust the Kabir nature of the system. The ledger is perfectly accurate. If a society builds its economy on exploitation and cruelty, the system registers the structural weakness. The yam, the manifestation point, will absolutely arrive when the cumulative weight breaks the structure. You don't need to circle the date on a calendar. You just need to understand the physics of a rotting foundation.
Okay, I want to zoom out now. We have gone incredibly deep into just 2 verses, 33 and 34. But the sources ask us to look at the full arc of Surah Luqman. If we view this entire chapter not as a random collection of moral platitudes, but as a cohesive document, how does it all tie together?
It is breathtaking when you look at it as a complete syllabus. Surah Luqman is a highly structured, step-by-step curriculum in civilizational design.
Walk me through the syllabus. Where does it start?
It opens by identifying the greatest threat to a rational mind law, which translates to idle tales or distraction. It essentially tells the reader, control your information diet or you will be easily manipulated.
Oh, man. I want to spend a minute on law because that feels more relevant today than it did in the 7th century. We live in an attention economy. We have algorithmic feeds on our phones, literally designed by psychologists to hijack our dopamine receptors. So law isn't just chatting with your neighbor about the weather.
No, law is systemic cognitive suppression. If you are constantly distracted by endless, meaningless content, you cannot be a mutaki. You cannot be hypervigilant about navigating the dangerous ravines of life if your eyes are glued to a screen watching 15-second videos. Distraction prevents you from calculating the long-term consequences of your actions. It keeps you trapped in the short-term optical illusion of Satan that we discussed earlier.
Because if you are busy reacting to immediate superficial stimuli, you don't notice the rot spreading in the foundational structures of your own society. So the curriculum of Luqman says, step 1, turn off the noise. Reclaim your attention. What's step 2?
Step 2 is the transmission of unbroken causal wisdom, which is framed as Luqman advising his son. It establishes that you cannot split the causal framework. Actions have consequences. Then it introduces the concept of the mustard seed ledger.
The mustard seed ledger. Explain that.
It's the idea of total micro-level accountability. The text says that even if an action is the size of a tiny mustard seed and it is hidden deep inside a rock or lost in the heavens, the system will bring it forth.
It's fascinating how this ancient text essentially anticipates chaos theory or the butterfly effect. The idea that a micro-action, seemingly hidden and totally insignificant, can ripple out and alter the state of the entire massive system.
Because in a perfectly integrated system, nothing is truly isolated. Your private actions eventually bleed into public consequences. Let's say you are a contractor and you secretly cut corners on the steel rebar inside a concrete pillar to save a few $1,000s. That is a hidden mustard seed action. No one sees it. It's buried in stone. You might get away with it for 10 years.
But the system registers the structural weakness.
Exactly. And the yam, the manifestation point, is the day a minor earthquake hits, the pillar fails, and the building collapses. The system demands that your private ethics match your public posture.
Which perfectly leads into the next part of the syllabus. The Surah explicitly talks about correcting your physical posture. It says, do not turn your cheek away from people in contempt, nor walk through the earth exultantly. Don't walk with arrogance.
Because arrogance is the delusion that you are exempt from the physics of consequence. Wealth and power create a bubble of false predictability. A billionaire starts walking with a puffed-up chest because they think, I have endless money. I know exactly what I will do tomorrow, and I can control exactly where and how I will die in my private high-tech medical suite.
But the syllabus lands the plane right where we've been focusing today, with the irreducible unknowns. The system says no. Gravity applies to kings and peasants equally. The system reserves the right to introduce an unpredictable variable, A sudden market crash, a microscopic virus, a geopolitical shift. The billionaire is just as subject to the irreducible uncertainty of tomorrow as the poorest worker on Earth.
And the most brilliant, subtle part of this entire curriculum, the masterstroke of the whole chapter, it is delivered through the character of Luqman, a figure that the text never explicitly calls a prophet.
Right. Why is that so important? Why not have a famous, towering prophet like Moses or Abraham deliver this ultimate blueprint?
Because by using Luqman, who historically was considered a sage, a wise man, a philosopher, the text proves that this wisdom is accessible to raw human reason. You don't need a direct supernatural revelation from an angel to understand that fire burns. You don't need magic to see that economic exploitation ruins societies. And you don't need a miracle to realize that uncertainty demands proactive alignment.
Is the ultimate democratization of wisdom. It says, look at the natural world, look at history, look at human behavior. The laws of consequence are written into the very fabric of reality. It demands that we stop treating these texts like esoteric spellbooks that only an elite clerical class can decode and start treating them like open-source manuals for human flourishing.
It is a rational operating system available to any conscious human being willing to observe the universe with clear eyes and an undistracted mind.
So as we wrap up this incredible journey, what does this all mean for you, the listener? How do you take this dense 7th century architectural blueprint and apply it to your life on a Tuesday morning in the 21st century?
It means auditing your life. Where are you relying on intercession instead of accountability? Where are you secretly hoping for a bailout? Are you hoping your company's prestige will cover for your mediocre work? Are you hoping your family's social standing will excuse your poor character? The architecture of this system is telling you unequivocally that strategy will fail. The nervous system of consequence is individuated. You will eventually feel the burn of your own mistakes.
It also means radically changing how we view our own anxiety. We spend billions of dollars globally on therapies, meditation apps, and self-help gurus trying to eliminate our uncertainty about tomorrow. We desperately want to guarantee that our investments will pay off, that our relationships will last, that our health will hold up.
But this text tells us that if you actually got that guarantee, it would destroy you. It would turn you into a machine running a boring, predetermined script. It would strip you entirely of your moral agency.
That is the ultimate reframe. Every time you feel that pang of anxiety about the unknown future, recognize it for what it is. That anxiety is the physical sensation of your free will operating in real time. It is the friction of the steering wheel in your hands. You are driving the car, the road ahead is unmapped, and therefore your choices matter immensely.
You view the whole system not as a punitive, angry force waiting to strike you down, but as a meticulously balanced, perfectly fair environment designed to grow that kalima tayyiba, that deeply rooted, high-reaching tree of human potential. The system desperately wants you to bear fruit, but it insists, absolutely insists, that you do the farming yourself.
Which requires that kashiyat, that hyper-vigilant care. We aren't just consumers in a cosmic hotel calling down to the front desk to complain when the plumbing breaks. We are cultivators in a massive open field. We are given the seeds, we are given the water, and we are told the unbending laws of agriculture. The rest is entirely up to us.
And the laws are unchanging. The Yongyum will arrive. The manifestation point will always arrive, and the ledger will balance accurately. The only question that remains for the rational agent is, when that manifestation point finally hits, what reality will your inputs have constructed?
It all comes back to that initial tension we talked about at the very beginning. This text is not a horror story designed to make you cower in the dark, waiting for the end of the world. It is the ultimate blueprint for building a civilization in the bright light of day. It tells you to stand up, look at the mechanisms of reality with clear eyes, and stop gambling on the unknown hour. Stop trying to predict the unpredictable, and start doing the hard, beautiful work of aligning your actions right now. And so, as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, empowering concept to mull over as you go about your week. If our inability to predict the future is the very mechanism that guarantees our free will, then our anxiety about tomorrow isn't a weakness. It isn't a flaw in human psychology that needs to be cured. It is the ultimate, undeniable proof that we are conscious agents. We are holding the pen. We are completely capable of designing our own civilizational future, one calculated, responsible action at a time. The page of tomorrow's blank, precisely so we can write on it.